The WWE Hall of Fame is March 31st, and we have a great Hall of Fame. Last week was kind of controversial in a way, just based on not that they didn't deserve it, is that there were several people that was probably way more deserving than that particular person. This week, the WWE rights a wrong that they made last week. Not saying that again that Beth Phoenix didn't deserve it. There's just several people that deserved it more before than her. But nonetheless, this next inductee has been someone that's literally been petitioned for by the fans for years. Even hell, they probably could have inducted him after his death in 1999. One of the most, God, I mean, you look at the guy, and probably the best body in the business, at least up to that point. There can only be one: ravishing Rick Rude. A man, just looking at his managers tells what kind of company this guy was in. You go from Jimmy Hart to people like Bobby the Brain Heenan and the Heenan family back in the day. Paulie Dangerously and the Dangerous Alliance, later known as Paul Heyman, of course, but the Dangerous Alliance, along with Medusa in the Dangerous Alliance. Even Paul Jones. And people are wondering who Paul Jones is. You want to look that up. It's probably there in the Mid-Atlantic days. And here's a surprise for some people. Even in the days of world class, Percy Pringle III, as people may know him as Paul Bearer. And he's even managed a few people himself, from people like Kurt Hennig in the NWO, and a founding member of D-Generation X, technically. The only reason I say technically is because he was the insurance policy for Shawn Michaels heading into Hell in a Cell, and of course, the whole D-Generation X faction at that point. Even though China was an acceptable muscle at that point, you needed someone with prestige, someone that knew what they were doing, a veteran, per se. Not saying that Shawn Michaels and Triple H weren't veterans, but at that point in time, they were still young in the business, and they were still getting their first big run as main eventers. So you had to have someone like a Rick Rude to show them the way. And of course, with that, you have to mention the guy being the only man, as far as I know, to be on Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro on the same night. And with that, technically, you can go with the technicality because there was an era where Raw was live one week and taped the next week. But, he was on both shows, so you can't really get that away. And on top of that, he was on ECW in the same week. So, the guy knew how to get around this business. But let's stop talking about him in a moment, but let's talk about his accomplishments as a man in this business. First of all, from the Championship Wrestling for Florida, the Florida territory back in the day, the NWA Southern Heavyweight title, the Florida version, of course, a two-time holder of that. The NWA United States Tag Team titles, the Florida version, with Jesse Barr, which was I believe the father of Art Barr, if I'm not mistaken. Or probably the brother of Art Barr. Either way, still a great accomplishment nonetheless. For the Continental Wrestling Association, which eventually, as far as I can remember, became the USWA. The NWA/AWA Southern Heavyweight title, a one-time holder of that, which what I mean by that is basically the title was still technically in NWA territory, but was also in the AWA as well. So it was kind of governed by both bodies at the time. And also the Southern Tag Team Championships with King Kong Bundy. For Jim Crockett Promotions, which would later on become WCW. 3-time WCW International World Heavyweight Champion. I might have to explain that for a little bit, because at the time, WCW lost the rights to the NWA title, aka the Big Gold, which some younger fans may know as WWE's World Heavyweight Championship before they got unified with the WWE title. That belt in particular, in 1991, was taken by Ric Flair, who was simultaneously NWA and WCW champion at that time, to where it was the greatest belt ever in the WWE as the real World Championship. At that time, WCW had their own World Championship made, and it was shit. Literally, the belt was horrible. Not in design, not that they didn't need their belt. It just compared to what they have had over the past few years at that point. It was kind of a disgrace. It wasn't a bad looking belt. It just you cannot compare that to the big gold. And once that belt was brought back, they still had the WCW title, so it was rechristened. The big gold was rechristened the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship by the International Board of WCW. And that's where you have the free time world there. Technically, Ric Flair has held that belt 5 times, as if I'm not mistaken, technically would give him 21 world titles. But that's another story for another day. No, I take that wrong. It was 2. Still, you could probably bring that number to 18 instead of 16, but nonetheless. As well in WCW, a former United States Heavyweight Champion, a former NWA World Tag Team title holder of the Mid-Atlantic version, back when it was still Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, with the oh Lord, Madness is a team. The Raging Bull himself, Manny Fernandez. And this is an odd one. The Nintendo Top 10 Challenge Tournament. I don't even remember that. It was probably something in Japan, but still, Rick Rude, Nintendo. That's kind of a weird thing to think about. For the PWI, the most hated wrestler in 1992, ranked at number 4 in the top 500 in the PWI 500 in 1992, and ranked at number 57 in the PWI Years Edition in 2003. For World Class Championship Wrestling, aka the World Class Wrestling Association, when it was WCWA, one-time NWA American Heavyweight Champion, one-time WCCW Television Champion, and former World Class Heavyweight Champion. For the WWE, former WWF Intercontinental Champion, of course the Hall of Fame, and in 1987, the Slammy Award for the Jesse the Body Award. And for the Wrestling Observer Newsletter, a 5-star match in 92 with Steve Austin, Bobby Eaton, Larry Zbyszko, and Arn Anderson versus Sting, Ricky Steamboat, Dustin Rhodes, Barry Windham, and Nikita Koloff in a War Games match in 92. For those who don't know War Games, think the Elimination Chamber, but different. It was 2... How do I explain this? There was 2 rings, a cage that basically surrounded both rings. There were teams of 2. It's basically TNA's lockdown match, if you want to make it easier of the description. It's basically their lockdown match, except there was 2 rings surrounding a giant cage, and at the end, there was no weapons on the top of the cage. It was the match beyond, where you would only win by submission. It might have been pinfall or submission later on, but I believe at this one it was submission. The best heel in 1992, the most unimproved in 93, and ironically, the worst worked match of the year in 92 with Masahiro Chono and Halloween Havoc. And as we come back, I'll just have some final thoughts on Rick Rude.